Gamecock fans should be rejoicing with the latest news that Shane Beamer has received an extension through the 2030 season. We have to talk about this, folks. Man, it's an exciting time if you are a Gamecocks fan. We're going to take a look at a statement that was made by the athletic director, talk about where Shane Beamer sits in Gamecocks football history as far as wins, and take a look at the schedule for next year. There's a lot of expectations. Like, let's be real. This past season in 2024 was a fantastic year. Did not end the way that people wanted to, but it was a heck of a fight in the bowl game against Illinois. And I think South Carolina should have a lot of momentum. Got a really good defense, really good offense, and a Heisman candidate quarterback in Lenore Sellers. And yes, that's going to be a thing. Sure, he may be down on the list, but the fact that they have someone who could potentially win the Heisman at the quarterback position says a lot. Now, preseason expectations, all the hype, the talking around this doesn't mean much. You got to prove it on the field, and South Carolina has a lot of momentum. We saw this kind of up and down. We saw a slower start for Beamer in year one, but like getting things back on track. A solid year two, a year three that kind of fell apart, and then year four where things seem to be back. So can he take the momentum that he has built up and catapult his team? A lot of folks have them projected as a top 15 team. I don't care where you put them, top 10, top 15, top 20. Gamecocks for next season are going to likely be ranked coming into the year, and it's just a matter of what they can do with it. We'll talk about their schedule here in a minute. How can they sustain that? We saw this year, they're likely to have a chance at the playoff, going to have to sit around 10-2. And yes, we can officially talk about playoffs right now because it's a new season, it's a new start. Again, I understand if you don't want to get your hopes up just yet, but let's dive in. Let's go ahead and share some commentary from the athletic director. So you can see here, Beamer extended through 2030. We got a statement from the athletic director here at University of South Carolina on the extension. He said, the culture and commitment to excellence that Coach Beamer has built in our football program shows that we are headed in the right direction and on a strong upward trajectory. AD Jeremiah Donati, hope I pronounced the last name right. Coach Beamer has made clear his desire to be at the University of South Carolina, and this extension shows our collective support for him as the leader of our football program. And I believe they just extended the women's head coach, made her the highest paid coach in women's basketball. Very good program. Hey, South Carolina knows how to win championships. And I mean, in all sports, they're starting to get there. I know in football, they probably love an SEC title. No doubt about that. And to get into the college football playoff. And I think this year is going to set them up well. I will tell you, it's difficult to an extent because they play the same exact SEC schedule that they did last year, but home and away is flipped. I feel like the SEC got a little bit lazy, just my honest opinion. They got lazy and said, well, coming into, bringing Texas and Oklahoma, we'll sort through this way this year. But we'll talk about schedule in just a minute. Speaking of Beamer, where does he sit in the history of the South Carolina Gamecocks? And so 29-22 overall record. I talked about this much earlier in the season as we were getting down the line. More wins in the first four seasons than any coach in Gamecocks history. That says a lot because you can look at the man at the top of this list and Steve Spurrier, pretty good football coach, head ball coach at that. 29-22 overall record, 569 winning percentage. There's only, Joe Morrison from 83 to 88, Billy Lavelle from 28 to 34, and of course, Steve Spurrier with better winning percentages that have played 50 or more games. So good company for Shane Beamer to be in. I would like to see, how can he take this program to the next level? Because the SEC, I don't really care what your opinion is on the Big Ten. Maybe I do, maybe I don't. Yes, I know Big Ten has won 2 of the last national championships. I know there hasn't been SEC representation in the national championship the past 2 years. but the historic dominance of the SEC, like going all the way back to like 06, 07, is clear. You look at the talent that gets into the NFL, it all primarily feeds from the SEC, Big Ten right below it. So, very tough conference to play in. It's like what I used to think of with ACC basketball and University of North Carolina and everyone there. But my gosh, that whole thing is falling apart. Let's go ahead and take a look at the schedule for South Carolina. You know what? Let's make this a little bit bigger. How about that? Beamer extended through 2030, of course, is the headline. Next year, South Carolina kicks off against Virginia Tech. Man, I am excited for this game. Cannot say it enough. Shane Beamer going against his dad's former team. And it's funny, before I really knew what was happening here, I was like, man, it would be so nice if there was a series between South Carolina and Virginia Tech. I wish it was not a neutral site. I wish it was a home and home, go up to Virginia Tech, have one game at South Carolina, but this will do. Maybe in the future they can extend that, but I'm excited for this. You know, I believe it was on the Kyle Bailey Club show way back earlier this year when Shane Beamer was on there. They were talking about this game. And I think he said his mom is much more of a Virginia Tech fan than his dad. So Frank Beamer always pulling for his son, no matter what. It's going to be interesting. He said he's probably going to have to do the most work on talking his mom into pulling for South Carolina when they come up. But that's going to be a big matchup. The Aflac kickoff game Sunday, August 31st in Atlanta, Georgia. So neutral site. They have South Carolina State. So that's a cakewalk. And as we talk about, scheduling, preseason expectations, I think it's a big game. Virginia Tech should have been halfway decent this past year. I think they'll be better next year. They're not the Virginia Tech of old. That is clear. But starting off with a win against Virginia Tech is important. And also moving on to South Carolina State. So you start off 2-0, really good. Vanderbilt is not the Vanderbilt of old. It's going to be a tough matchup there. No doubt about it. Very tough matchup. Good thing it's at home. So for South Carolina, is getting off to a 3-0 start, 1-0 in the SEC, important. Then you have Missouri at Missouri. We know about the game this past year, how difficult that was. I mean, came down to the very last minute. I mean, literally final seconds. I thought South Carolina was going to lose that game, and they were able to pull it off. And I guess, let's move back. Sorry, because my schedule did cut off a little bit. The other game is Kentucky. So from an SEC standpoint, easier-ish. I want to use ish because there's no easy game in the SEC. No easy game at all. So again, Vanderbilt, Missouri, and Kentucky. That is probably the easier stretch for South Carolina, though, in the SEC schedule. Because as we go ahead and look here, I'll make this a little bit bigger. After you go through those first few games, you then have LSU. At LSU, you do have Oklahoma at home, and I expect Oklahoma to be better. Alabama at home, and then at Ole Miss, at Texas A&M. That's just a tough stretch. Like, no doubt about it. That is a tough schedule to go through. They then close out. I mean, that's really their SEC schedule right there. LSU, Oklahoma, Alabama, Ole Miss, Texas A&M. They get a break with Coastal Carolina. And, of course, we know they close the season with Clemson. It's hard, man. I mean, the SEC is hard. There's your schedule. Also, I mean, the fact that when you talk about conference scheduling and people bashed the SEC commissioner when he made this statement, you look at South Carolina playing two power conference teams out of schedule, Virginia Tech, and of course they always are going to have Clemson. That's not easy, folks. A lot of people are out here scheduling cupcakes. I kid you not. SMU football. I have to go back and look at this because I said, what? Why would you even post this on your schedule? And maybe they took it down. No, they kept it up. They've announced a matchup with East Texas A&M to begin the season. East Texas A&M. SMU. Talk about easy schedule. This is why there's a conversation around scheduling, because you have SEC schools, and I think you have Alabama taking on Florida State. You have schools that are trying to put good matchups together for football. But on the flip side, you've got teams like SMU, who's going to have a cakewalk, or in Indiana. I haven't looked at an Indiana schedule, but nowhere near the same type of out of conference. Even Coastal Carolina. I look at Coastal Carolina out of the Sun Belt. They've been up and down. Usually a pretty good football team, and that's not going to be an easy task at all. And I think really the only easy game on South Carolina's schedule next year has to be South Carolina State. It's wild. Anyways, folks, that's going to do it for today's episode. It's fun to get caught up, and I will continue to have more college football content now that the NFL season is over. At least I'm getting up to speed on everything I need to do for the Panthers. As always, this is Carolina Dad. Y'all have a good one.